Well, it is 12 noon. Good afternoon, everyone. I think we will go ahead and get started. We appreciate the comments and the remarks that are coming in about the first session, and hope that you find that this session will also be a way to stimulate your creativity and for us to continue to move, to think about the CSJ charisms and how they play out in our work. As I was listening to Andre and some of the comments, I was channeling my president, Becky Roloff. As you know, St. Catherine is a women's institution primarily, and like many of your institutions, has a liberal arts foundation. And Becky always talks about our traditions and our legacy in three ways. It really is the Catholic piece, ties us all to a sense of social justice and making changes to empower others to change the world. That the women-centered piece of us really helps to foster resilience and to help in the tradition of the CSJs, women to be all that they can be. But she talks about the liberal arts base as really that problem-solving base. And that stays with me as an important piece of our foundation as institutions. We certainly live in a time where we need to educate individuals to engage in problem solving on both an individual, more localized level, but also in a global fashion and in a global way. And one of the benefits of being Catholic institutions is that we have a little bit more freedom to talk about our mission and to talk about values as it plays out. I'm fond of talking about the sense of vocational calling, that for all of us, coming to work at a CSJ institution allows us to bond and connect with students in a way where we can share our values and really promote the love of dear neighbor in a way that really helps to make sustaining change in our world. So I want to start just briefly and reintroduce, sort of ground us on Catholic social teaching and Catholic intellectual tradition. We are then going to go right back into our breakout groups. We have another set of facilitating questions that will really help us again to think about more specifically how CST and CIT plays a role in our institutions. Marie Lynn Miranda, who is the provost at Notre Dame, gave a keynote address at the American Catholic Colleges and Universities conference this February, and she talked a lot about the values that Catholic educational institutions share. I wanted to sort of start with this as a grounding and then look at how it relates to our ACSSJ values and then move into Catholic social teaching principles. What I found interesting about Dr. Miranda's thinking is that really grounding all of the aspects of both what we expect for the student experiences, but also how it plays out in our roles as faculty in terms of teaching and scholarship and service, and staff and administrators in helping with student life experiences in a holistic perspective for our students. There really is this sense of the need from an educational mission perspective to do a holistic work with our students, to really think about the development of the mind and the body and the spirit of every student. I was raised as a Jesuit, I always say raised, but educated at Loyola, and really think of myself as a Jesuit. And that holistic sense, I think, is really critically important. We are finding ourselves today with students who are coming in from diverse backgrounds in ways that is increasing in diversity across our institutions. We're certainly finding that our students are presenting with more mental health issues and concerns. And that was before COVID-19, which has ramped up the sense of stress, social isolation, depression, and anxiety in all of us, faculty, staff, administrators, and students. And so to really think about, are we living out that sense of educational mission and really helping in a holistic fashion to work with our students? The idea of a research mission and a research base and really thinking about that sense of discovery. One of the outcomes that we talk a lot about across our institutions is that need for critical inquiry. And if you think about the LePuy method, what Andre really is doing with her students is saying, here's an issue, here's an area, go explore. and explore not in a way that's coming just from an individualistic perspective, but one that leads to that sense of creativity in connection, in relationship, in a way that really fosters that sense of discovery. And I think really thinking about the natural world and our connection to it, thinking about the human condition as a whole and the importance of our students' problem solving makes it critical that we endeavor to think about that research mission to serve the world. Following that, then, certainly 2020 has led us to understand the importance of a just society and community. We've been talking a lot about human rights and dignity and Black Lives Matters, really understanding our sense of connection to others. It's the best time for us really in Catholic education to really be thinking about how do we embrace ending oppression, how do we embrace anti-racism work in our curriculum, and how do we build societies that are really reflective of justice. And then finally, thinking about that sense of vocational calling, what does feed ourselves? What's intellectually challenging and interesting? How do we feed our souls? Many individuals at St. Kate's will hear me often go on a rant about the outcomes for our students. We've certainly been thinking about their degree programs and their majors and the academic content and trying to integrate that a little bit more into the co-curricular experiences, service learning, community engagement for our students. But where we should excel as Catholic institutions is that sense of feeding the soul, having conversations with our students about their sense of passion, helping them as they foster resilience, to think about their careers, to think about their work in civic engagement, and to think about the ways that they will improve the world. It's critical for us to really be thinking about feeding the soul of our students. It goes without saying that we need to engage in feeding the souls of ourselves, and we'll talk a lot about that as well. So you can see similarities in what Dr. Miranda pulls out with Catholic values to what we have decided are the important ACSSJ values, and you'll find that on the website. Really thinking about creating hospitable and caring campus communities. I think the COVID pandemic challenged us to really think differently about building communities. And I hope that in the next 2 sessions, we can spend some time thinking about the lessons that we learned and how we continue to promote that. Of course, the love of dear neighbor without distinction, drawing from the love of God, is an important value and characteristic. And you can see that when you think about Catholic education really being essential to what we should be doing. The need for addressing the needs of the times. I always think about how we are preparing students for jobs that don't exist yet. We also now need to start thinking about preparing our students for a society that we are dreaming, that we think would be optimal, that we think would be respectful of all humans, and really helping them with concrete skills to be able to endeavor in that work. Striving for excellence in all of our endeavors. So happy to see as many of the CSJs on the call with us. The legacy of excellence doesn't need to have words to it. We really, though, do need to continue to work with our students and to strive for excellence. And then really working to make a difference in the local and the world community. I think all of us use global in our language in terms of outcomes for students, thinking about inclusive excellence and cultural fluency. But global and local are pretty much interchangeable today. And I think we have to help our students to really think about outcomes that really help with the localized perspective of self in context, but also with that global sense and really thinking about the world. So then I do not want to spend a lot of time on the Catholic social teaching principles, although I often will tease faculty about they're not pedagogical strategies, but really values that the Catholic Church has asked us as educational institutions to embrace. But one of the questions that we will be endeavoring to answer in our small groups is really, how are we living out the Catholic social teaching principles in our institutions? Life and dignity of the human person is critical as we think about the dignity and worth of individuals. It certainly should point us to a sense of ethics and moral values and providing a moral vision for our students. The call to family, community, and participation. These are traditions that proclaim that the person is not only sacred, but also social. The Catholic social tradition here teaches us that human beings grow and achieve fulfillment in community. We certainly saw that in COVID-19 and that sense of isolation that all of us felt. The need for Zoom connections and Zoom happy hours and family calls and meetings. And certainly as we've been increasing our vaccination rates, the videos, the pictures of people actually being able to touch each other, of grandparents being able to hug grandchildren, certainly takes us back to the need for us as an institution to really value that sense of community and participation and have that play out in every aspect of our work. Rights and responsibilities and thinking about how human dignity needs to be protected so that we can have healthy communities and endeavor in maintaining basic human rights. The option for the poor and the vulnerable. This should be a basic moral test for us. We certainly, in the last several years and today are actually seeing reports on children who have been separated from their parents at the border. We certainly can think about poverty and health disparities and differential outcome rates as part of the COVID-19 pandemic. We've even started thinking about and looking at how women have been differentially impacted by COVID and the economic impact on the workforce, balancing of family responsibilities and child rearing. And those are important issues that the church has asked us to address. The dignity and work and rights of the workers, and certainly thinking about rights promoting a fair and healthy economy, one that protects human life, defends human rights, and advances the well-being of all. This is an area that I think is a personal passion of mine. And as we think about preparing our students, not just for the launch and leaving our institutions, but really moral and ethical corporate responsibility as they engage in their work needs to be highlighted. That sense of solidarity, learning to love the dear neighbor and understanding how it connects to our global dimensions and an interdependent world. And then finally, that sense of care for God's creation. We're having record heat here in St. Paul, so I don't know if it's better to be virtual or not, on day 6 in temperatures of 90 and above, but certainly thinking about climate change, global climate concerns, our care for the earth really are critically important for us. All of this, of course, has implications for how we think about our education. We need to prepare students for ethical and moral dimensions of professional practice and good citizenship. Sometimes that comes in one. Your vocational calling, your sense of career can help you as you think about citizenship. But all of us as ACSSJ institutions need to be thinking about the role of civic engagement and community engagement for our students. Are we helping students to approach careers as vocations in the service for the common good? And what does it mean for us as we prepare students for positions to really be thinking about moral and ethical social responsibility? And then what are we doing to help students to think about responsibility to contribute to society? I worry a lot about the upcoming generations, the Gen Z, the iGen generation, for a couple of reasons. They are really engaged in more passive learning styles and pedagogy. The individuals that we have between the ages of 8 and 25 have only been educated through applications on computers and through technology. And what we're seeing from that are that sense of global isolation and social isolation. We need to really think about their ways of learning, how that was impacted by COVID-19 and their connection to others, and really work to foster that sense of responsibility to contributing to society, to leaving a legacy and helping the world to be a better place. All right. That then lands us on how does that happen through the Catholic intellectual tradition. I like this intro to CIT as it really helps us to connect those Catholic social teaching principles and our work in really thinking about what are the strategies that we use both inside and outside of the classroom to promote social responsibility with our students. Catholic intellectual tradition is optimistic and joyous about what it means to be human. I think that's critical after the pandemic to really think about all of the strengths, the worth and dignity of others just because they're a creation of God, for us to impart and to think about with our students. It's transcendent and challenging about how we understand ourselves as spiritual beings. I know in the small groups that we've already started talking about how do we look at some of these principles with students who are not necessarily Catholic or who are a-religious or who claim not to have a particular spiritual heritage. What's important for us is that students, all of us as humans, have spiritual needs that need to be addressed in our curriculum and as part of our co-curricular offerings. We really need to think about helping students with that sense of transcendence, the common good, and the sense of greater good. It's sacramental and celebratory in its affirmation of our dignity. We just have worth just for being children of God. It's integrative and inclusive in its desire to spread the good news. And it's creative and multicultural in its vision on how God is present to the human experience. Oh, I did need you, Mary. So if you think about the Catholic intellectual tradition on a pillar, starting with the sense of the innovation for the common good, that we all need to think about that sense of social responsibility and the importance of maintaining our connection, our communities, and that global perspective, followed by the importance of the dignity of the human person. I think I've said that at least 12 times in this brief presentation, but we really need to be thinking about how do we foster resilience? How do we empower our students so that their sense of human dignity is preserved and elevated and affirmed while maintaining that sense of common good, that sense of global perspective, the development of cultural fluency, and other types of inclusive excellence outcomes. All of that then gets tied to the important components to Catholic intellectual tradition. We alluded to faith and reason earlier. I think Andre talked about that in her session. If we think about faith as a form of knowledge, juxtaposed with reason, which leads us to our sense of rational inquiry, scientific method, exploration, it's important to teach our students and for us to work with the balance of understanding the illuminating dialogue between faith and reason. They do not have to be mutually exclusive. And we should be helping students to engage in rational inquiry with a sense of faith traditions, spiritual formation, as they develop their sense of vocational calling. We think about the connection to being integral to the Catholic Church. The Church and the Academy should be united in the endeavor of advancing the common good of humanity. As higher ed institutions, we really have to be thinking about the principles and the dignity of love, as Sister Carol so aptly read for us as part of the covenant. Hospitality and tradition, I think these are the cornerstones of how we see ourselves as higher education institutions. That sense of openness and warmth should be reflected in our scholarship, in our service, and all of our academic pursuits. We need to welcome questions and dialogue that comes from understanding of one's identity, along with understanding fully each other. the ultimate goal of our sense of hospitality and tradition really is in modeling civility, something that we did not see early in and through our election period, but the importance of thinking about civility in our conversations, civility in our commitments, and civility in our priorities. The sacramental vision really talks about the habit of mind of Catholic imagination to see all that exists as opportunities for wonder, delight, fascination, insight, and an invitation to know something we cannot see. We had an incident management team at St. Kate's when we started to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic and made the decision to take our educational services online. And President Roloff, throughout the COVID-19 experience, talked about the wonderful, great adventure that we were on. I will confess, as the academic officer, that I was not often thinking about the stress of faculty, the stress of students and learning as a great adventure. But I certainly appreciate how President Roloff really embodied that sense of wonder and fascination and insight. And it forced me always to think about the lessons that I was learning as we were endeavoring to sometimes make difficult leadership decisions. But as our faculty were really working with students and our staff were really thinking about the student life experience through that period. And that, of course, then leads us to that sense of the power of beauty. We have to see the aesthetic in everything that we do, and to help our students and our community to be embedded in that sense of aesthetic and beauty. That, of course, then takes us to the appreciation of creation and the study of the physical world. There are truths that are revealed and scientifically tested in fields like biology and chemistry and physics and mathematics. And we really need to help that intersection of, again, faith and reason, that sense of science and the appreciation of creation as they endeavor together. All of that, of course, then helps us to help our students to understand and to really think about pedagogical strategies based on the important teachings that we offer. So we have a set of questions about how the Catholic social teaching principles and the Catholic intellectual tradition play out in our work. So we are now going to move back into our breakout sessions. Waiting for everyone to zoom back in. Sorry for that. We were trying to figure out how to extend you more time. As I was being a voyeur on each of the groups, I cannot wait to see these Google Docs because I think I just landed with the social sciences group. That was the best dialogue that we've had. I want to take this opportunity to allow the facilitators to share any updates, insights from your group process. Will never be enough time, Mary. It's not a problem.
I'll speak for group 7. Wonderful people in this group, great conversation and dialogue. What we identified was that, where am I? So often, all of this is embedded, not only in the core and in our majors and the way we work with students, but once again, we have to be more intentional about making that connection. Someone said that, they went to CSJ schools in high school and taught in college and everything, and that they had never heard about the Dear Neighbor. But it was so infused that when she finally is teaching on the college campus now, she's like, well, of course, that's what it all was. So we just need to be more intentional.
And I was hearing in some of the groups that tension between naming it, and, the difference between the big C and the little c Catholic and the affiliation with the Catholic Church, and thinking about where we are contextually with the church and our times and the needs. But I think if we don't start to name things more intentionally, especially for this next generation who seems to want purpose and alignment with passion and alignment with their identity in ways that I think will be new, for many of us, that we'll end up losing the students and not helping them in that developmental process.
Yeah, I'll chime in from group 3. I think to your point, Provost Thomas, was really how we ended the conversation about the identity, the work of the CSJ, and how that really enriched what we felt was a much broader, more inclusive invitation in the Catholic tradition. And really, we compared and contrast some of the experiences that some of us had at other Catholic institutions, and to the comment of big C, little c. So I think there's just a richness here because of our CSJ heritage that you may not find at some other institutions.
Thanks for that, John. I know there were some discussions in the faculty group suddenly like, wait, what is admissions doing in terms of recruitment, and how much do we talk about the CSJs and their legacy and the types of then learning experiences that will occur for students on campus. So I appreciate you sharing those feedback. Other groups? Anita,
I can share, I think, group 1, the student affairs colleagues. In listening to our discussion today, I'm thinking of Joan Hurt's book, Where You Work Matters. And there's a chapter in that book about the interpreters. When you work at a faith-based institution, how do student affairs professionals navigate that? And I could sense that our group was no less committed to tenets of the Catholic intellectual tradition, like committed to the common good, was referenced specifically by our group, the dignity and respect of others. But I think I agree with some of the other comments that were shared. I think it's the terminology that sometimes trips us up to when we get into a space where we're talking about things Catholic, that we see our work more as a lived embodiment of the charism of the institution. And I think sometimes it's a challenge for all of us when we bring up big terms: Catholic social teaching, Catholic intellectual tradition.
Thanks for that, Matt. I do think the language and the jargon is important to sort of think about it. As something that you said outside of downloading a new book to read. Thanks, Matt. Something that you said really made me think about the need to answer those big questions and to do it in a way that they can come to us, especially student affairs professionals, to really be vulnerable and to share some of their thoughts and their thinking. So it'll be important for us to really think about how do we foster that sense of critical inquiry and that exploration without being intimidating or using too much jargon or speak, or tying in a way that might be offensive to other students. Yeah. Someone else is going to share.
Hi, this is Joyce Hampton, and I was privileged to be with the Faculty Arts and Humanities group, and ideas a mile a minute. And so just taking a look at some of the things I wanted to share out from this particular group. One idea was the idea, thinking about Catholic social teaching. Many of the people have been involved in first-year seminars or mission-based courses within the curriculum, and how important to be able to take those ideas, make sure that they're introduced in a way that is understood and embraced by those that are coming in with a Catholic background and those that are coming in and just really understanding about what Catholic social teaching means to each one as a human. So that was one idea. And the other thing that I put out there was, how do we see it visualized? And we see it visualized within the curriculum, but also co-curriculum. We think about, our student service staff, our TRIO programs, that is living out the Catholic social teaching on an institution. And then finally, I wanted to share, this particular group had the ideas around, when you are looking at the impact on curriculum. And so it can be on a course level, it can be on a major level, it can be on a minor level. And so we talked a little bit about one institution, how criminal justice and that major changed when it began to think about restorative justice principles and pieces like that. And so how that really impacts the larger institution. So it was a fun group.
Great. I think I didn't make it to your group because we didn't have enough time. So thank you for that summary. It does sound like a very rich discussion.
I was campus ministry mission officers, and I'm Carol from Elms. And, I think the one weaving thread of the piece of lace is in the interdisciplinary emanates from the CSSJ charism, and that it is our task to identify that and to set that strategy forth in the areas of which we work. And for some of us, that means a little more broad base, that, you know, you work with a larger span of the community at the college. So if I was to pick one thing, I think that it was sort of the last gong as we were emanating out of the meeting, is that the interdisciplinariness really, it emanates really from who the Sisters of St. Joseph are, and how we're tasked with expanding that legacy going forth.
Thank you, Sister Carol, for that. For some reason, your thoughts made me think about spiritual gifts. When you really think about that interdisciplinary work and perspective, and how each of us has our own individual strengths, talents, abilities, that sense of calling, that as you go through the 7 principles for Catholic social teaching and think about, you know, we're going to pick one large world problem or social issue. Clean water stays with me as an example, that it really does pull all of our own individual talents and perspectives to that. It brings a sense of multiple ideas from a variety of disciplines to really be able to solve that. And I'm hoping and I'm thinking that you all are seeing the challenge for us as we're training young people today, that we need to really think about that sense of leadership and how that plays out in interdisciplinary teachings and training. So thank you for that sharing. I don't know if Denise, who else was doing the academic administrators group?
Our group actually talked a whole lot about curriculum structure, curriculum revision processes, and ways that the charism of the sisters and the principles of Catholic social teaching find their way and have continued to find their way in the design of curriculum on our campuses.
Great. I knew that you all would have an assessment lens to bring to that as well. And are we really measuring and thinking about what we're teaching and moving in that direction?
They were patient with me.
Any other final comments or? I think I've gotten all the groups and the breakout rooms. Well, I hope that you have been stimulated throughout this morning and afternoon session. It really is wonderful to hear all of the ideas about really living into our founders and our legacy as a way for us to continue to educate our students. Tomorrow, we will be really digging more into thinking about some of the specific charisms and how that plays out for us. You know, one of the things for me, when I think about a Jesuit institution, is that students come to campus sometimes through admissions interviews, writing about what the social justice legacy of a Jesuit tradition would mean, but certainly by the end that they would leave with that. And as I have onboarded and settled into here at St. Kate's, a CSJ institution, and I have the pleasure of being able to interact with a lot of the sisters, the power of that legacy, but also the power of that work, the legislative advocacy and activities that all of us engage in, I think is really incredibly powerful. One of the groups is really talking about that balance of the sense of faith and reason. And as we have certainly as a country in a lot of ways really moved to a much more polarized perspective, I think young people are really wanting to know where the gray lies. And I think that our institutions really can help with that sense of balancing of faith and reason, but also thinking about the middle, the continuum on a variety of aspects. So I'm looking forward to the products and the continuing sharing that will come as a part of this work of the gathering.